It's my pleasure to introduce Cassie Byrne, who is the president of SHIFT at Northwestern, which is the atheist group there. They're actually the secular humanists for inquiry and free thought. They are one of the first three campuses that participated in sort of the prelude to Everybody Draw Mohammed Day activity that went on late this spring. Cassie has the honor of being the first person who has written something that I made into a cartoon. It's a silly, anyway, it's on my Facebook page. It is a cartoon from one of her very eloquent quotes on the SHIFT website about why her group decided to chalk Mohammed, and Mohammed is saying her quote. So anyway, I think it's cute. But thank you. Anyway, please welcome Cassie.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Cassie Byrne, president of SHIFT. So this movement has sort of yielded various inflammatory responses, both from secular and religious groups alike, mainly due to the misconception that it was targeted at any particular group, or the assumption that, you know, it's an attack on religious belief rather than an honest defense of free speech. So, first of all, I'd just like to start us off by going through the three main goals of the movement before we get into the chalking experience and the events that followed. So, in chalking stick figures labeled Muhammad across our campus, SHIFT intended to, first, to defend free speech in the light of the recent incidences of public self-censorship brought about by fear and intimidation. Second, to challenge a cultural taboo surrounding the depiction of Muhammad by people outside of the Muslim faith. And thirdly, to establish solidarity with the other secular student groups who chalked, as well as with Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the creators of South Park. So just a little background for you. If you're easily offended, avert your eyes. Back in the year 2001, South Park aired an episode entitled Super Best Friends, in which the Prophet Muhammad, as well as other mainstream religious figures, appeared as a team of superheroes. And this episode did not yield any notable uproar, death threats, or censorship from the network. But since then, however, much has changed. The Danish cartoon controversy, with which we're all familiar, occurred in 2006, preceded by the Dutch filmmaker assassination, Theo van Gogh, in 2004. These events have significantly shifted society's intuition about how we should approach Islam, and they have also led to a disconcerting self-imposed compromise of our freedom of speech. So in 2006, South Park created an episode concerning the controversy of depicting Muhammad, and in light of the Danish cartoon incident, the network censored the images. More recently, 4 years later and this past spring, South Park creators decided to rejuvenate that controversy in celebration of their 200th episode. So the episode made a point of satirizing as many celebrities, religious figures, and cultures as was manageable in a two-part episode of South Park. But still, when it came to depicting Muhammad, the Comedy Central once again censored the images in fear of the consequences that may have come from a death threat that appeared on the Revolution Muslim blog. In addition to this, the three offending episodes were pulled from the South Park website, where the episodes usually stream freely. So after this incident hit the newsstands, the SSA-affiliated group from the University of Illinois, Atheists, Agnostics, and Freethinkers, decided to respond to it by chalking stick figures labeled Muhammad across their campus. And soon after that, the SSA group from the University of Wisconsin, Atheists, Humanists, and Agnostics, followed suit. And actually, the Muslim student group at that campus did an interesting thing. They decided to exercise their own freedom of speech and altered the images so that the Prophet Muhammad became the boxer Muhammad Ali, as you can see. And they also went to the lengths of smudging out the name on some of the drawings also. Still, there had been a lot of backlash from both of the university's campuses. So Ed Clint, the president of the AAF, sent out an email to all of the SSA-affiliated groups saying that we should join together and join the movement so that we could actually make an impact, and no one group would be standing up alone. And this is where SHIFT decided that it was a cause of need to support, so we participated. Since our chalking, other groups have followed suit, the Pastafarians from the University of South Carolina, and we even observed a stick figure Muhammad while we were walking around DePaul's campus, which would suggest that there are dozens out there that just didn't get press coverage, I guess, or something. So the movement is far from over, it would seem, which is why I'm speaking to you all today, to give those of you who want to participate some advice and moral support, and perhaps to provide those of you who are against the movement with a solid case for chalking Muhammad. Now for our account of the experience. Before we set out chalking on that fateful Sunday night, we sent out an email over our listserv just to sort of gauge the interest of our membership. And there was some negative feedback, so we decided to postpone the chalking, and we had a meeting instead where everyone was free to present their point of view, and we would discuss it and ultimately vote on the outcome. And so ultimately, there was no objections after we had made some compromises. One of the compromises we made was to sort of minimize the misconception about our intentions by keeping the chalkings away from congested walking areas, as well as putting down flyers that would advertise an open discussion we were going to be having at the end of the week on free speech and political correctness. So then, after that meeting, we scheduled the chalking for that night. And for something that would turn into such a scandal, there was very little initial fanfare. Less than 10 of us were there at the chalking event, as well as a few members from Northwestern's main publication, The Daily, whom we expected and we'd hoped that they would serve as a good medium for communicating our intentions to the public. But we weren't expecting the media frenzy that followed. It was the busiest week that we of the exec board had ever encountered in our short tenure at Northwestern. We were sending out letters to the publications, every publication, daily. It was just amazing. But so we were sort of in a tizzy. But there was sparked this really amazing sort of conversation, a dialogue over the internet, which, I mean, we wish that it had been transferred to in person, but everyone was expressing their opinion, and we got a lot of feedback from it. It was predominantly negative just because, I mean, we should have really been prepared for the spin that the media we should have been prepared and had our own press release ready, but the on-campus publications sort of polarized it from the beginning as SHIFT versus MCSA. And I don't know, we felt that that wasn't how we wanted it to be represented, and we weren't sure how to proceed to get our name a little better. But one very unfortunate and unforeseen co-occurrence of events that didn't really help was the arrival of a group of students from Northwestern's campus in Qatar, or Qatar, I think it's Qatar. They arrived the morning after we chalked, and it was awful. And it's just one of those freak events where you can't really do anything about after the fact, but they did allow us to explain ourselves further at a meeting that we held, and so that was really productive. I think both groups profited from that. But yeah, if you're gonna chalk, I know it's hard, just make sure that you are hyper aware of the goings-on of your campus, because those things happen apparently. So also by pure coincidence, the week of our chalking was the same week where we were going to have a talk with the Northwestern's new president, Schapiro, And the subject of the talk was originally going to be on the role of religion on campus. And we generally stayed on topic, but the elephant in the room was the shocking event, and so we touched upon it a little. And his response was actually very encouraging and surprising to us. He said that while he disagreed with our methods, and he said he would prefer if we hadn't done it, he said he would protect us and support us to the end because he's a fierce advocate of free speech. And so that was really nice. Unfortunately, however, the next day, the headline that went to the newsstands was, "Schapiro calls shifts chalking a mistake." And so that's just one example of sort of what we were up against, and it was really overwhelming to us, and we wish we had thought about that beforehand. That was one of our big failings, I think, was relying too much on the press and not enough on being explicit ourselves. So now you're all probably wondering about the open discussion, what happened there. It was poorly attended. There were some representatives from the interfaith program who were there, but we spent most of the time defending ourselves and not really talking about the issues at hand, which was a shame, really, because we really wanted the dialogue. But we were proud of the dialogue that had sprouted from the publications online. And we did fulfill the three main goals of the movement, however inflammatory the response was. So we were proud about that. Now I'm gonna give you some advice, maybe about what you might want to consider if you're going to participate in something like this, or this exactly. So really what you want to do first, before you take any action, is resolve any dissent within your group. Because we didn't want to put SHIFT's name on anything that our active members weren't in support of. And then you should really host an open discussion, because we do want to promote dialogue, open dialogue on campus. That's one of the most important things. We didn't just want to put our message out there and just step away like that's it. It wasn't really a period, it was sort of a question mark. And you should really, something that we wish we had done that might have helped a little bit was keep our chalkings generic and consistent and really explicit in the message. They were sort of out of proportion, and we felt that sort of catered to the misconception of it being a commentary on the religion rather than about, let's talk about this. So you're going to want to do that, and also publish a press release for immediately after the chalking to go to presses, because you don't want to give anyone else the reins on that to interpret it for you rather than here's what we're trying to say. And you should anticipate what people's opposition is going to be so that you can say what the protest isn't saying. And also, some of the sort of objection we got was that people were really offended that everyone was walking on Muhammad, and while we tried to reduce that misconception or the offense there, Northwestern doesn't really let us advertise anywhere but on the ground, so we thought it was ultimately a silly concern. But if your school has that option, you might want to take advantage of it just so that you can reduce the backlash just a little bit. And it might also be a very good idea, we wish we had done this, was the thought to collaborate with another group, another student group, so that you can take the focus away from atheism really and onto humanism. So maybe another group that, like the ACLU or something, that is openly pro-free speech, that you could sort of co-sponsor the event. And even the Muslim group, if that's your perspective. We chose not to, but that's certainly an option too. Now, since the chalking, many concerns have been presented to us, and so I just want to address some of those. Many people asked us, why didn't we just talk to the Muslim group first, before we chalked? And that's a good question. We did make a conscious choice not to, for the following reason. We were thinking about the Muslim community as a part of the whole community, and the protest was directed toward the entire community. It had a message for everyone. And we didn't want to single them out because it wasn't us versus them. We also the chalkings were also not a protest of Comedy Central's actions in particular. We thought that that incident was indicative of a deeper problem that's rooted in society about how we respond to fear and intimidation with self-censorship. So we didn't want to polarize it at all, and we didn't think it was an authentic exercise of free speech if we had gone around first and made sure no one was going to be offended. Because the offense was secondary, like Jen said yesterday, that first you have this statement and you'll offend someone along the way, but that's a secondary concern. It's not as, we didn't offend just to offend, basically. But we couldn't really avoid it. We tried a little bit to minimize the offense, but ultimately. But mainly, yeah, we didn't contact the MCSA for the same reason we didn't contact the Gay Straight Alliance or the physics department. It wasn't targeted at anyone in particular. It was for the whole campus to see. Another expression of dissent came to us in the form of hate crime accusations. And the people who argued this compared what we did to depicting the swastika or wearing blackface. But I hope that in a room full of skeptics that hasn't gone very far, that accusation, really the analogy falls short when you consider the history behind the symbols. Blackface, for instance, was made up by white Americans to ridicule the black population and prevent them from integrating into society. And the swastika was used by a fascist dictator as a symbol of his plan to commit genocide against the Jewish people. Our chalkings, however, were a stick figure with a guy smiling. And really, it's a symbol that is taboo in one singular religion because they have decided that for them, it doesn't behoove them to depict their prophet since it encourages idolatry. During our discussion, actually, with the students of Qatar, we pointed out that the swastika is a call for violence against the Jewish people, and chalking Muhammad doesn't call for violence against anyone. And then a young Muslim student said, no, you're wrong. It actually is a call for violence for the Muslims to attack those who make them. And I think that does well to illustrate the difference between the symbols. And really what the Muslim community and what society at large needs to realize is that the depiction of Muhammad has become a symbol of free speech in and of itself. And in America, unlike in Qatar, blasphemy is still legal, which I'm sure everyone in this room can appreciate. But of all the criticism we received, the most insidious has been the argument that just because we have the right to chalk Muhammad doesn't mean we should. And this argument has gained some ground even among the skeptical community. But really, this idea is to a large extent exactly what we wanted to dispel with our protest. Somehow, whether it's an overcompensation of the militant atheist stereotype or some idea that being accepted is more important than standing behind our own ideals, we are under the impression that at all costs we should avoid expressing our differences of opinion. But sort of in the name of coexistence. But that's not what coexistence is about. While getting along and embracing the human qualities that bring us all together is very valuable and very important, it's also necessary to express diversity, because that is the marketplace of ideas. Whether we like it or not, the secular movement is very different from any religion out there. Among these differences is perhaps our most important fundamental pillar, which is everything is subject to criticism and investigation. Even the most sacred figures, the most long-standing traditions, even the very idea of skepticism itself must be open to critique. Sometimes during these critiques, people who don't share this openness of ideas will be offended that we have taken their ideas and investigated them. But just because that they're not supposed to investigate claims with the same scientific rigor that we demand of ourselves. But we can't let that prevent us from our own investigation. Our inquiries are not personal attacks on those who disagree, and fear and intimidation must not be the force that dictates to us what we can or cannot express. So, thank you very much for your time.